this demo, let's talk about grid queries in OpenAdminTool for Informix version 3.11. Hi, I'm Sumant Rajagopal, software engineer at IBM, working on OpenAdminTool. In the Informix Flexible Grid environment, queries can now be run across all or a subset of the nodes. This adds a level of virtualization between the query and the sources of the result set. The query result is presented by combining the results from across all the nodes of a grid or a subset of them. In this demo, we'll see how data that is not replicated amongst the nodes of a grid can be combined into a single result set with a single select query. First, let's take a look at the grid that we have. We have the shapes grid with three nodes named rectangle, cube, and square that are part of it. Now let's look at the data in the three nodes that's not being replicated. First, a select on tab 1 from the rectangle server, and its data is here. This is the data in tab 1 from the server cube. And finally the data in tab 1 from server square. So you would have noticed that all three nodes have different sets of data. In order to perform a grid query, we need to ensure that the table in the grid query across the nodes of the grid are identical in column names and the column attributes. For this, we now have a concept called a grid table. So by adding the tables to a grid table list, we ensure that these column names and attributes are identical. We can add these tables to the grid table list via the schema manager in OAT, like we'll see now. Tab 1 is the table across the nodes of the grid whose data that we just examined. Let's add that to the grid table list. We see this information reflected in the information tab for the table. Now let's go back to the grid page to perform some actions that will give us flexibility in terms of the result sets that we can get from the grid queries. The nodes in a grid can be grouped into what are called regions. The nodes in a region can be a subset or all the nodes in a grid, and multiple regions can have the same nodes. Let's go ahead and create a region called 2D region with two of the nodes in this grid. We now have the 2D region with just the rectangle and square nodes of the shapes grid. Now let's run some queries on this table tab 1 across the nodes of the shapes grid and see some flexibility in the way the result set is combined amongst these nodes. First, we run the query on the local server, which is rectangle, and see its result set. The listing of tab 1 is pasted here for reference. Next, let's run the same query across all the servers in the shapes grid. And examine the result set. Finally, let's run this query on the 2D region of the shapes grid. So here we saw either 3, 6 or 9 rows being returned depending on if the query was run on the local server, on a region of the grid, or the entire grid respectively. And so we see the power of grid queries and its flexibility across the nodes of the grid. This concludes this demo. Thank you very much.